Well, hello again, and welcome to another session of the 15th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm still Bob Hales, and I'm still your moderator. Uh, our session this afternoon is a grading system that works, how specifications grading empowers students. And we have with us Darshan Reed. She's the Associate Dean of the College of Health and Behavioral Sciences and an Associate Professor of Psychology at the University of Central Arkansas. And she's been teaching for 16 years and still hasn't gone crazy and teaches both undergraduate and graduate level courses in psychology.
Mhm.
So, Darshan, I'm going to turn it over to you and tell us what we need to know.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Bob, for that introduction, and thank you for this opportunity. I am excited to present this information. I do want to say that my partner in crime, Shannon Reed Mueller, who presented this work with me at a different conference, she actually gave birth to her first child yesterday. So I'm so excited for her. So she would not be able to be here, but she did give me her blessing to still present the information for her course. And just so happens that I am taking over her course because she had to take leave for the middle of the semester for her child. And so I'm picking up on the course that we're going to be talking about for her actually this week. So I'm excited about that. So we'll go ahead and jump right into what we're going to cover today. And so I've already you've already heard my kind of background. I did want to present information on Ms. Reed Mueller because she is one of our clinical instructors here at UCA in our psychology and counseling department. And she also actually has been, she's a licensed therapist here in our state and came aboard our faculty as a applied psychologist so she could teach our students more, especially our undergraduate students more about the counseling path or the counseling track. But she's been teaching for us for 8 years, and she teaches primarily our undergraduate courses for a time. She spent some couple years working with our master's level program on identifying internships and practicum locations for our students. So she has a wealth of knowledge and information, and I definitely miss her in this presentation. So what I would like to cover over the next 60 or so minutes to talk about the challenges and hear from you all and some of the challenges that we face in the classroom when we assess student learning. I also want to focus on what students need from a grading system because I think there's some gap and discrepancy between what students actually need and what we're actually giving them when we utilize some of the traditional or current grading systems that we've been relying on so heavily. And then following that up with what specifications grading is. And I'm also going to try to incorporate what it's not, because as we talk about this, we have so many other what I call kind of trendy names and terms. Like we have other things that are similar but not the exact same. Some things overlap a little, one specifically being ungrading, and there's just a whole host of areas. But this specifically, I want to focus only on specifications grading to give a better understanding of what it is, and then reasons why you may be interested in incorporating it into your courses, and how it may be beneficial. Now, again, everybody's course is different. Every subject and discipline is different. So it may fit some spaces. It may not fit the entire course. It may not fit certain things. So we do have to be cautious and not say that this is like a kind of a magic that will change everything for everyone in every discipline, because that probably is not going to be the case. And then I would like to give some examples of how we have included specifications grading in specific courses that we teach. And I wanted to make sure we split because my colleague, Ms. Shannon Remuller, she actually teaches online courses. And I think it's beneficial when we talk about these things to make sure we talk about them, not just as this is the system, but also how you may have to implement that in different ways for different courses, be it hybrid, be it face-to-face, or be it completely online or distance learning. So I do want to provide those examples. And then lastly, just talk about how this may be helpful to you all and or where you can see it may fit your own courses. And then where you see there could be some challenges, and just kind of talking out loud about what this would do for different disciplines, because I would like to hear from you all about that. And then we'll have some closing comments, and any questions that you may have, I'm happy to address those. So the first thing I want to do, and this is where I try to get you all engaged, is I would like for you, if you can, go to menti.com and use the following code to join this little poll that I have, because I want to ask the question, what are some of the challenges that you face when assessing student learning? So I'm going to switch gears for just a second, because I have the poll open. So if you can join, that would be great. And I don't want to make it too high tech. So if you can't join, you can always join the chat and we can see your responses there. But if you want to share on the Menti, and I'll share those results as they show up. And then if you can't do that, you can definitely do it by chat. And we can see what are some of the challenges people are facing when they are assessing their student learning. I'm going to pause my share because I want to see if I can share the Menti to see. We have 2 people joining in and see what those come through as. Let me see. Okay, so we have a couple students using feedback, textbook knowledge versus clinical reasoning, and physical therapy. Okay, variation and foundational knowledge. Okay. These are great things that I think we all can relate to. And I'll give those, if you all want a minute or more to join, or if you want to share something in the chat, that would be great. I'll report those out as well. Okay. So I want to talk about these for just a second, because one of the challenges that I have faced, and it's a little bit more just straightforward. I think the students using feedback probably hits it close enough for me, because once something is graded, if you don't give the students an opportunity to make adjustments or changes, it's basically a final point. Like, it's almost like that's the end of their learning. And I value the students getting my feedback, and that's because I want them to learn how to make improvements. Like, I know we have some very, what I would say, very static points where we assess, but there's also, for me, is always going to be a place, can students continue to do something to still get this skill or this particular concept that they didn't get at this point? Now, our courses are always going to be shortened by time, so we can't expect them to just get everything, but we also can't expect them to stick and be stuck somewhere. We want them to move forward, but I also see it as a way for us to make sure that students are getting what they really need to get out of the course. And what I want to do now is go back to our screen sharing for the presentation, because one thing that I'm realizing and knowing is that students are not, basically, they are not able to get what we think they're getting from the systems that we're using currently. So, and can everybody just double check? Can everybody see the screen that I'm sharing? Let me reshare just to make sure we're on the right screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so a few of the challenges that we are seeing when we do assessments for students using a traditional system is basically that the scale that the system is using, one, is disproportionate. And what we mean by that is that we have A, B, and usually when we say point distribution, we're saying from 0 to 100 points because we identify A's from 90 to 100 typically. B's are from 80 to 89. C's are from 70 to 79. D's 60 to 69. F is 0 all the way up to. So that F range is clearly larger than the others. And so we have a disproportionate scale. And really, when you see someone, especially one of the things I notice is that when a student gets a D versus a F, or they're struggling between some of those, is there really a significant difference in what they were learning, like the skills that they've gathered? Can you tell the difference between a student who got a 67 versus a 70? Like, is there a huge difference in how much they took away from that learning experience? So that's one thing. The scale is disproportionate, but the skills are not assessed equally across assignments in a course either, because you might have these skills are assessed throughout the course. Some of the skills are only assessed in one specific part of the course. And so that could lead to some skills being gleaned from students and some skills not being gleaned because there wasn't maybe multiple opportunities to get that skill, just the way the course was set up. And so that poses some difficulty for us to really know, do students get the skills that they need after they leave the course if we've only allowed them to maybe practice or engage with that skill in one specific way or in one specific assignment. So that's the difficulty of the traditional grading system. And then the grades are not a good form of feedback. So if I give you a B on an assignment, most students are probably thinking, oh, thank God, I don't have to worry about that anymore. Or they may say, oh, I missed this, but only typically what I see is students who are very much perfectionists and they want every single point that they can get. They will then say, oh, is there a way for me to redo this so I can get these points back? And it's not so much that their focus is on actually learning the skill or understand the concept. They just are wanting to get the points back because they just got to see themselves getting the next grade up. So that's a hard part, is like knowing that students are possibly not using feedback, or the grades itself may not be a good form of feedback to a student, just to say you got this score, but not really know that there's a way for you to gather the feedback and use it. Again, we can all say we're giving students feedback, but what are they doing with it? Or are they actually taking it and then applying it in some way? And then lastly, traditional grades are not accurately reflecting learning. And I think this has been built up across a lot of literature to suggest you can get a particular grade, but does it, again, equate to that learning outcome for whatever the course objective was? And so that may not be true. It could be true. We assume, I think, that it is true when we say that a student got an A, they should be able to do these things. That's what we put in our syllabus. But is that truly the case if we then had to go back and say, are they able to do this? Are they able to communicate this, understand this? Like, that's what we really want to know when we assess their learning. So what is missing from this current point system that we typically use? In psychology, this is a pretty big area of research that we've looked at for quite some time. When we say goal orientation theory, and my research specifically is actually focused around goals. So I love some of the stuff that we've done in this field, looking at these motivational factors as well as these cognitive connections to how students are learning, but also what maybe impacts or motivates them to learn. And so goal orientation theory suggests that goal orientation is going to affect the individual. In this case, we're talking about students, their cognitive and or emotional tendencies towards something. And that's going to trigger the behavioral responses that we want. So the two different sides of the spectrum that students can typically fall on under this theory is mastery versus performance orientation. And the difference between these two is that just the language. Am I performing or am I mastering? And specifically what we like to see and what's the best and what research has shown is that students who take up or have a mastery orientation, they're actually learning more and they're going to do better. And essentially they perform better than the students who just take this performance orientation, because performance is characterized by the belief that success is a result of superior ability and of surpassing one's peers. So it's all about, I got to get this grade because I need to be this good, and I want to be better than these students in my class, or I want to be the top scorer. And again, is it really focused on what am I learning in this class? Did I really learn what definition of social psychology did I really learn research? Like, what am I learning in mastery? And that's focused on the individual, whereas when we take performance, we're literally connecting it to maybe a standard or norm that we're trying to compare ourselves. And that's one of the things that I think is critical, is that we need students to focus more on themselves and comparing to themselves. What are you learning to be better? How are you enhancing your learning to go to the next level, rather than are you outperforming your peers? Because that's not going to be long-term what they wanted to focus on anyway. So I think this is the part that's missing from our current system that we don't have, that can be embedded in some of the other methods and systems that are coming forward, which the one I want to talk about today is specifications grading. And I put the image here of Linda Nilsson's book because I became familiar with it through a reading. I read the Chronicle of Higher Ed and the Inside highered.com articles pretty much on a regular morning basis. And one of the articles actually talked about specifications grading, and I never heard of it, but I was just like, I had always been drawn to wanting to move away from point-based systems, because I just saw how detrimental to me it has been to students, because it's getting them focused on getting a score rather than learning. And I would always counsel students to say, hey, I know you're so invested in your grade, but I really am more concerned about you understanding this material. So when I read this, I was just like, oh my gosh, I feel like it's a wonderful gift dropped in my lap, because now I have an actual kind of approach and structure to go with what I already wanted to do. And that allowed me to shift my courses, some more wholly than the others, like partially in some spaces, to this type of system. So what it does is it allows the instructor to grade all the assignments and tests as satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or pass fail. But what I love about this system is not just you passed or you failed. It's what's embedded in the system to say what a pass and a fail is. So students earn all points or no points, but it meets the specifications of what the instructor laid out. And typically what the instructor is laying out is things connected to the course objectives. So they provide very clear, detailed specifications, or what we call specs, to give students the idea of what is considered acceptable, satisfactory. So if I do this in this course, and this is a course objective, if I just do this part of it, that may not be enough to say, I know what this concept or this theory or how this is applied. So then I can get feedback and I can say, okay, I can try this again. And now that allows me to say, yes, I have mastered that skill. And it's focused on, again, giving those clear, detailed specifications. And typically what happens is that this is bundled together in a course, or you can put it in modules. That's what I've done in my courses. We'll talk about And then it's tied to the learning outcomes of the course, or if you have a program that you're doing, you can tie it to the program goals. And so students are not necessarily achieving all of the outcomes, because we know every student is not going to get every single thing in our class. We know every single student is not going to master every single skill. But what this allows us to see is what skills did they master and what skills did they not master. And we also can use that as a prioritization to say what skills are absolutely essential for this particular class or this program. If I'm training my students for psychology, what skills are absolutely essential when they walk out the door that I know they need to have? That allows me to prioritize, and that's what I build those modules around. The things that I want them to know that may not be critical, I can still build that into my class and give them the opportunity to gain or glean that skill, but it doesn't mean that it's something that's like a no-go where if they don't get it, then all is lost. No, I can still see that they captured these skills, they didn't capture these skills, but they have the opportunity to capture them all if they would like and put the effort towards what is necessary. So I like this system because it does not define a letter grade per se. It defines the satisfactory based on what we want them to learn, which is those learning objectives. So here's the table of contents. I just wanted to throw this in here because I think it's helpful for you all if you're, and I do encourage you if you're interested in this grading system or even trying it out, that you could take a look at the table of contents of the book and purchase the book and read what's helpful to you. I know when I first started, I wanted to take a look at what the specific pass-fail chapter 4, pass-fail grading for rigor and motivation, and my peace of mind, because I didn't want to jump into something that I felt like, oh, this is way too much. What did I do to myself? This is too much crazy grading or something like that. I wanted to know kind of what is expected of me before I transition to this place. So that's the different chapters. And I think, again, the example chapters were very helpful as well, just seeing what maybe other instructors and what the author has done to allow this to be incorporated in their courses, which is why I wanted to provide some examples of how we've embedded in our courses as well. So definitely shout out and want to encourage you all to get that text if you're able to. And here's where I love this grading system, because just like the title of this presentation is that how this grading system can motivate students and encourage students to do their best. And I like this picture because it reminds us that students are in different spaces. They come to the class with different backgrounds, different knowledge, different understanding. And when we set up our courses, we want them all to succeed. But specifications grading specifically for me can motivate students like running a race, and they get to choose how far they want to go. And we can see sometimes, for example, in psychology, we do a lot of what we call courses we teach for other departments. So it may be a minor that we have that someone's taking a course in our department for a minor, or they're called service courses, but we teach a lot of students who may not be majoring in psychology. They may take Gen Psych, for example. However, those students, they would then be able to determine maybe what skills or what information they needed, and they could put their efforts there. Again, this is not saying that the student is not motivated to do well in your class. It's just saying I'm giving them the latitude and flexibility to determine where they need to be and what skills they want to develop. Now, there are certain skills, like I said, we can prioritize and build into that system, but this allows them to know what they want to try for. And the one thing that I really like is that I walk into the class the first day of class and I tell students, this sounds funny, but I tell them, you can get an A, you can get an A, we all can get an A, because most often they never think that everyone can get an A in a class, because then some kind of way, oh my gosh, this isn't an easy class if you all can get an A. No, with this type of system, you can get an A. Everybody can get an A if they do what's expected of those learning objectives and those modules, because that's saying you did the work to show you gained this skill. So I like that, and it motivates them. They have very low stress and anxiety when they walk out, because they already know what do I need to do when I come into this class to be successful. And successful means getting the learning objectives completed and the ones that are prioritized. The other thing is that we can offer scaffolding in this system. And here's where I will say there is some connection to ungrading. Ungrading is where we allow students an opportunity to go back and make corrections or give feedback, and then they make corrections based on our feedback to then turn in again and get a grade. This allows for that. You can set that up into this system. And it also allows you to, again, the scaffolding could be, I'm giving you some examples, details, different maybe rubrics or different opportunities for you to see levels of where you can go and what you need to kind of continue towards. So it allows us to kind of be right there and help the student along the way. We already do that in some form, but I feel like this kind of gives us a better connection to students, because we can see them individually struggle. Where are they struggling? What skill are they struggling? And how can we help them with that feedback that we give them? And like I said, it already talked about the reduces grade uncertainty, because they are going to be focused on like knowing what they can get already, but it changes their orientation. And this is why I said it can motivate them, because it moves them from that performance. I got to get this grade so much. I got to get these points, or I have to do like, and it's not about performing, because most often in my courses, I'm going to show you that I don't do a whole lot of high stakes exams in my courses. I do give exams, but it doesn't mean that they're all going to be like based on like that point system and you got to get. I like to do things that are, again, showing that you capture the skill. And don't get me wrong, I know a good multiple choice exam can be easy to grade. And if you have large number sections and courses, I don't discredit that. But I think this system allows students to see the difference between, am I performing or am I actually trying to master this skill? And that's the one thing that I really value about this system, is it kind of shifts their orientation away from that, just performing just to perform, and actually doing it because you're trying to invest in your own educational journey and you know what you need to learn and what you need to glean. So improving learning and performance outcomes, that comes naturally when you shift over to that mastery orientation. We know research has already shown that that's the best place students can be to do well and to perform well. So it's not just about the performance. So what I like to show here is my swimming pool analogy. And of course, I would love to have a swimming pool that looks like this in my backyard, but I found this nice little picture. And I wanted to present this picture as the analogy for how I approached specifications grading versus how my colleague Shannon approached specifications grading. So we chuckle a lot because when I got into specifications grading, I thought it was so like, oh, this has answered my prayer, because I really wanted to change my grading system anyway. So what I'm going to say is I did take a look at that book and I got super excited. And I probably was the person that went up those stairs and slid all the way down into that deep end and just jumped right in, because I was just like, oh, yay, I'm so excited. You'll see the difference in what I mean by jumping all the way in. And I did have some points where I was like, what did I do to myself? Because I don't think I probably counted up every single cost to switching so abruptly to that system. And again, it wasn't a bad experience. It was a great learning experience. And my students enjoyed the learning experience as well, shifting over, because I did tell them, hey, this course is going to be different than what you've always seen before. So here's how. And my colleague, Shannon, what you're going to see in her work is that she basically tiptoed on that little shallow part and stepped her foot in, stood there for a little bit, and then she maybe took a little step down a little bit farther. And then that's basically all she did, because she didn't feel as comfortable like I did, and I probably had a little false sense of security. She didn't feel as comfortable doing the whole deep dive in. So we talk about this. Any instructor, they can go in the pool wherever they feel comfortable. You can wade in the little jacuzzi if you wanted to, if you felt like this is what I want to do and this is where I'm staying because this works for my class. Fine and dandy, that's wonderful. If you want to do the same, you might want to jump off the edge and jump right in and just do a whole triple flip in or something. That's fine too. I just want people, when we talk about this, I want people to recognize where are they and what works for them, and then how comfortable, and you can even move like into the deep end gradually. You might move out of the deep end gradually. Something may have changed where this may not be so well structured for your course or your discipline to do this, because there's always things that may change that affects our teaching and how we structure courses. It could be accreditation requirements for our programs. And so we might need to do some shifts or curriculum changes that's happening. We have a lot of that happening right now. So that may change or kind of direct how you're doing something in your class. So I do feel like this gives you some of that flexibility to do that. So I told you I took a deep dive in, but I was still a newbie. And this is how I learned. I'm not going to regurgitate some of this because we already talked about it. But I did want to say that I started with a course that was one of our upper division courses, and it was a diversity course. And it was particularly our last course in our course curriculum that students had to complete. So I want to jump in and talk about that for a minute as an example. And so this is using specifications grading in a traditional face-to-face. So I do want to say that this is traditional face-to-face course, and it's called History and Systems, but it's basically our course that is a kind of overview seminar course to say when students have gone from freshman to senior, they should have learned these major topics and concepts. And then at the end of the course, we give them what we call a field exam, and they take that exam so that we know how much they learned. So this course is basically an overview survey, reminder, refresher, but it goes into a little bit more detail about people and also kind of where we are in our current psychology field. Where are we in terms of research? Where are we in terms of our 4 major focuses in psychology? So that's where we're going to start. And here are the objectives of the course. So they have to learn how modern psychology is defined, major schools of thought in psychology, important people and the people who connect to those schools of thought, and then the evolution of where these schools of thought have come and gone. So that's the objectives of this particular course. And it's labeled diversity because, again, it covers a gamut of different topics in our field and specifically different people. So these are the student outcomes, and I highlight these course objectives and learning outcomes because, remember, the specifications grading is directly connected to the outcomes of the course and what you want students to learn and take away, and skills specifically. So these are learning outcomes and indicators that are connected to our field. We have what we call the APA guidelines for undergraduate education. And I took that and I took the student learning objectives for the course, and I basically tried to create a system where students are getting these particular things, which is connected to our profession. They're also getting that content objective taken from the actual course concepts and textbook. So this was a diversity course. So this is just our language for our university to say why it's designated as a diversity course. So here's where the requirements and specifications come into play. This had 5 course modules, and this is why I said you can bundle stuff together or you can connect it, so that students are knowing what skills and what they're learning, and you can recognize where they're getting it, where they may not be getting it. So at my very first attempt at this, I actually connected the textbook chapter quizzes and supplemental papers, because I felt like that was the crux of those learning objectives for the course specifically. And I needed to, within that module, they completed 8 chapter quizzes. So they had about 12 chapter quizzes, but they had to complete 8 with at least 80%. So I'm still giving them some specific guidelines to say, if you completed these particular modules and course quizzes and you got 80%, then I know you're at least understanding the content in the textbook that we're covering. But they also had 2 papers, and they had to get an acceptable rating on the paper. So this is kind of embedded within that module, some more specifications grading, because the papers were about people, and they had to, one, write a biography about one person that we covered, and specifically they're writing a biography from a lot of different information that we just kind of discussed and talked about for that person and their life. And so they got a rubric that told them, okay, these are the things you have to cover. Here are the things that would indicate high quality work if you mention these pieces. So they got some guidance on that. And that would be module 1. And then module 2 was a diversity. This is connected to our field, because at the time our field had a very health equity focus from our president. And so I wanted them to have that as a part of their understanding, because it was also critical when we were going through COVID, because I taught this class right on like the back heels of COVID. And there was a whole lot of health equity stuff going on. And I felt like that was a very critical moment for students, and really to see this real time. So they had to complete 2 activities and write reflections about them that connected to this idea of health equity. And so one of them, for example, was that they had to go to their doctor's office and or go to the student health center, and then they could talk about that experience, of how that experience looks for them, but how it may differ for somebody else who may have a different age category, how they may look differently, how that may look differently if they were not a US citizen, or they may have a different background. So health equity focus. So that was a module. So those are just a couple of examples. And so I prioritized the concept skills that I wanted them to gather. And obviously, the first priority is that they're getting the information that we need them to know from the textbook, those schools of thought, those people. That's what I prioritized. And then the second one was the diversity module that I prioritized, because it was a real life situation that was impacting our field and how we were working. And so I wanted them to get that. But then you have these other ones that were connected. Professional identity, I value that, but that wasn't a make or break that students couldn't pass the class if they didn't complete both of those, or if they completed one. And then the major field test, that was something that's tacked on. So like I told you, there's accreditation and there may be department requirements that you have to do. That is a department requirement that students have to take that test, but they just have to take it or they get it incomplete for the course. So it was connected, but it wasn't like I wanted to make students petrified, like they had to get a certain score on that, because we just want to assess how are they doing in our program for that. So those are the requirements and specifications. This is how it connected to the actual letter grades. So I'm just going to read one of these. For example, a B indicated they completed the textbook module. They partially completed professional identity. And they had to complete both textbook and diversity, because those are the ones I prioritized, but they could partially complete the professional identity. They did have to complete the test at some point because that was a department requirement. And then they also completed the enrichment, which was something else that is connected to our department, but it's, again, not high priority for the course specific. So this is just an example, again, not saying that this was perfect, because I had some hiccups throughout this system that I created just from scratch, but it was usable and it allowed me to tweak it. And then moving to my second class, I'm teaching this class right now, and I've taught it for the last 11 years. And this is the first time I've moved it completely. I did have some of it a little bit, maybe 2 years ago, that was partially specifications grading, but now I've actually gradually moved it all over because now I've gotten to a point where I feel it's feasible for me to actually be able to do that. So the objectives for this class, and this is a face-to-face class as well. I have taught this class completely online. During the summer, we teach this class completely online, so it still would work the same way. And I could tell you, if you have any questions about that particular platform of online, I can answer any questions from the perspective of this course that I've taught online as well. And these are the objectives. Again, these are taken directly from what we need our students to know when they complete our research methods course. And this is specifically because we value and put a high price on research experience for our students in our department. So these are things that all students, we expect them to gather when they leave that course. This is a capstone course, so this is another special designation course, and it's upper division. It's their capstone experience because now they are bringing critical inquiry and communication together within our discipline to create this research experience. And so that's why it's a special designation, but kind of connecting back to, again, the examples and knowing what the requirements and specifications are that you could set up. I had, again, 5 course modules. These all modules are based on skills that they need to have to be successful, not just in the course, but actually, again, going back to that undergraduate education document, I took some of the same things from there and made sure that these modules reflected not only the course content we wanted them to have, but also that overarching our discipline's expectation for students after they graduate. So these are all modules, and I don't want to belabor the point, but these are all modules that they had to complete and how it connected to the grading. I just highlighted this one just so you can kind of see that the key elements of this is that for them to get an A, they had to complete all the module work. And I also specified that they needed to complete it by the due dates and make revisions. So they got opportunities to do some ungrading and get some corrective feedback. But the big thing for me is that they recognize that all the module work is key and critical because this is something that is a capstone experience, and we really want you to get all of these skills when you leave the class. So I didn't make this as that you had to complete all the modules and make sure you turn it in by those revision dates. The communication guidelines, those are things that they have to learn how to communicate with other people in our field and how we communicate. Because if anybody's familiar, we have an APA manual that people use to write papers and ways we communicate orally. So they had to learn that because, again, that's a key part of our field. And so they had to master that. And then poster and oral presentations, they had to complete that presentation. Now, high quality indicates a certain thing, meaning they're prepared, they practice. It doesn't mean that the student is not petrified, because every student usually don't like giving presentations or talking out loud. But there is the baseline is that you've prepared, you know what you're going to say, and you show up, basically. So then you have some opportunities for feedback, again, to submit your final report, which is a manuscript, because we try to train our students on how to complete a research manuscript. And so those are all the things that they have to do to get an A in the class. But notice I would be able to recognize and say, yes, she knows how to communicate orally using our psychology format. She knows how to write this type of paper. She knows all the aspects of the paper. She knows how to disseminate research at a presentation or a conference. So I can say that with confidence because when the students complete these areas, then I know that they are able to do those skills. And then lastly, I know I want to get through Ms. Friedmuller's information, and I want to leave some time for comments and discussion and questions. But basically, this is, again, her online, and this is where you just putting your foot into the water. You're not jumping in full-fledged, and it's just a exploratory practice maybe. So she taught developmental psychology, has been teaching it for a long time. And I actually am teaching the course for her now, and it's online. These are the objectives. So identifying issues of theory development, physical, cognitive, social, emotional development across lifespan, and then applying concepts from the class to their own life and reflections about that. So this is her grading system. And again, you can see she still has points assigned to her assignments and the work. But what I've highlighted in blue is actually what she has focused on being specifications grading. So all the grade that's there is traditional. She just grades it based on the traditional format, and she does have rubrics that help students. But for the homework assignments, students are allowed to do their first attempt, and they only get 20 points or 0 points. So it's an all or nothing. So they do the first attempt on the homework, and they can get a 20 or a 0. If they get a 0, they are given automatic feedback as to what part of that project or that assignment they didn't master. And she uses very specific grading rubrics on her online platform. So she built in these automatic grading rubrics where she looks at it. She can check mark the grading rubric where they did well and they got the pass. And then she can check mark it to say they didn't do this part right. And then she still has an option to give them very specific line feedback to say, okay, go back and try to get a different source because this is not the correct source that you need for this assignment. And then she sends it back. And then they get another due date to say, turn in your second assignment or your second attempt. And then they can complete that and get 20. So she really wanted to practice and just see how it works for her grading before she jumped all in. And so this has worked. She worked some kinks out, I think, over the last year. And now she's just kind of happy with it's working and it's flowing. Students get the feedback. They see what they've done wrong, and they absolutely use the feedback to make changes and get that turned back in. So again, just reinforcing that there's rubrics used, giving feedback. And one thing I do want to say is you have to be aware when you're doing this type of system on an online platform, you do need to be aware of the learning management system that you're using and what the limitations or flexibility is, because she had to do a lot of tweaking to figure out, okay, our rubrics in this learning management system are set up this way, and they only allow maybe these particular things. So there are some things to be considerate of when you recognize that these grading platforms may not be as useful. So there's last two things, and then we'll jump right to some questions because I do want to get to hear from you all. But some considerations when you do online. One is the learning management system. What can be built on the front end that makes less work for you on the back end? And then also, it might be helpful to use or partner with a course designer, maybe through your teaching and learning center, if you have that on your campus, because they may be able to help you kind of work through some of that early stuff that could be a barrier for setting certain rubrics or grading schemes up into the system. And then also, I found this helpful is recognizing how much preparation time you may need to build some of that feedback if you want to do automatic feedback to students, or how much time and preparation you may need to build into your schedule when you create these different assignments or grades. For example, you saw in my first class, I had a lot of grading on papers, and I did automatic quiz grading, but I had a lot of papers in that class. So I had to build in even more time to review, but also use my rubrics for that course. So just something to be aware of when you're thinking about using these, especially with online platforms, being familiar with what's there. So for sake of time, I'm not going to go back to Mentimeter, but I just wanted to hear from you all. You can do this in the chat. How might you see this fitting or working in your course if you are interested in, or do you see any barriers or any limitations to using this type of grading system in your course? And if you want to unmute, you're happy to unmute as well if you would like to do that. Okay, so I see some answers coming in. So like the idea of trying it out with the type of assignment, dip my toe in. Okay, thanks, Shelley. Yeah, absolutely. And I would almost say that probably is the safest way for everyone. Because like I said, when you jump right in there, you could, I had a lot of extra time during the semester where I had to work things out on the fly, and it was a little stressful for me. And it wasn't as stressful for students because they knew I would get to the point of getting it resolved, but it kind of gave them a little hiccup at first. Okay, the biggest concern is the time. Yeah. I think, and just giving you an estimate in terms of the amount of time on the front end that I spent for that class to set it up, it probably was an extra maybe 2 hours of my typical preparation that I would do. And I had that was a new class prep for me. So that probably was already going to be built in as more time to put stuff together. But I definitely think the time component, you invest the time on the front, but once you get it going, it's kind of a well-oiled machine. Then you have more time on the back, so you're not spending so much time on the backside. Oh, time to grade things a second time. I can comment on that in terms of the second gradings. Most of what I've seen with students when they turn in the second grade, it's not as comprehensive as what you might think when they miss the stuff on the first. If you do very well in developing those specifications and rubrics, and or if you had examples, again, people have different opinions about providing examples and stuff, but if you do a good job of explaining and giving those specifications on the front side, I have not seen students just bomb, and it takes me a lot to grade. Like, for example, on the biographies, most of the regrading that I did for those biographies was because they missed like one particular part. And so all I did was go in to see if they actually got that part, and they fixed it. So I didn't see any significant, like, oh my gosh, this is taking me 30 minutes. I think it took me all of maybe 3 minutes to go through a paper to see what they changed and what they corrected, and that was it. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so I appreciate the feedback and the thoughts. So I do want to get to the point where I can open it up now for any closing remarks or questions. Any questions? And I'll stop
Well,
sharing.
I think we have closure then.
Okay.
This was good, and I think you've tempted people to try this.
I hope so. And I just want those of you to know that if you have any questions, you are happy, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have in the future. So I am putting my email in the chat, and I think it may hopefully be available in some of the contact information. If it's not, then it is andersond@uca.edu, and you are happy to reach out, and whatever way I can be helpful, I will be that.
Okay,
All right.
well, thank you so much for doing this. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. Don't forget, you're welcome to attend any other session.
I will. I absolutely will. Thank you so much.
Okay, have a good rest of the day, Darshan.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.